Welcome to all those tuned in today to my mini-series, Unusual Events. I'm here to represent today's episode, the January-February airplane crashes. But in the meanwhile, make sure you both like and subscribe onto the channel for more content and video update notifications here on the Magic House channel. Okay, so to start off with today's episode, I will be taking us back to the early month of January 31st, 2025, where the deadliest plane crash since September 2001 happened. When an Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Eagle jet, killing all of 67 passengers, including all those amid the helicopter, due to failure in a glimpse gauge and broken communication among the air flight traffic controller. The Army Hawk helicopter was supposed to be flying at altitudes less than 200 feet above ground, but wind up flying at altitudes 270 feet and above. The ground level and going off by as much as 130 feet above from its main flight course path. Let's show the footages.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.
Exactly 6 months ago, we started this broadcast at the scene of the nation's deadliest plane crash since November of 2001.
Today, the National Transportation Safety Board began a 3-day investigative hearing looking into what led an Army Black Hawk helicopter to collide in midair with an American Eagle jet near Reagan National Airport. There were no survivors.
Family members watched and listened to testimony about a crucial but glitchy gauge aboard the Army helicopter and broken communication with air traffic controllers.
Our senior transportation correspondent, Chris Van Cleve, has been covering the crash since it happened, and he leads us off tonight. Chris, what have we learned?
Every day since that crash, the NTSB has been going through wreckage and data, trying to figure out why this accident happened. For the families of the 67 lives lost, today was a difficult day, in part because the NTSB released new video, and it is our clearest view yet of this tragedy. Looking out from the edge of a runway at Washington Reagan National Airport, you can see American Airlines Flight 5342 on approach to land, when the Army Black Hawk helicopter appears to the left on a collision course. The crash killed 67 people.
We went from a family of 4 to a family of 2, kind of in a blink of an eye.
Doug Lane's wife and 16-year-old son were on the plane coming back from a skating competition in Wichita.
When we had an opportunity to go to the crash site in January, strikes you is just how close they were to being on the ground.
We are working diligently to make sure we know what occurred.
The National Transportation Safety Board is now in the midst of a 3-day investigative hearing in Washington focused on answering investigators' lingering questions. At the time of the crash, the helicopter should have been flying below 200 feet, but it was at least 70 feet higher. Investigators are focused on potentially inaccurate altitude readings from the Black Hawk that in testing were found to be off by as much as 130 feet. NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy.
If the helicopter was telling them with plus or minus 100 feet their altitude, how significant is 100 feet in this case?
It's significant in this case. Helicopter Route 4, which went along the Potomac, in that area, we calculated that the margin of error was 75 feet. So a 100-foot difference is significant.
The chopper pilots were wearing night vision goggles. The NTSB released this image of how air traffic in the area may have appeared in their limited field of vision. Newly released transcripts from the airplane's cockpit voice recorder show the pilots received an automated verbal warning about traffic in the vicinity approximately 20 seconds before the collision. Less than 2 seconds before impact, the pilots shouted out in alarm. Flight data indicates they then attempted to climb aggressively to avoid the helicopter.
I know that my son saw that helicopter 1 second before impact, and they tried very hard to avoid it.
Tim Lilly's son Sam was the airliner's co-pilot.
Sam was a good pilot, and he would have been trying to fly that aircraft all the way to the bottom.
Black box data from the helicopter indicates those pilots never saw the airliner they were about to fly right into.
Chris, I keep coming back to the altimeter being off by 130 feet. That's hard to get your head around. Is that the norm? I mean, why are they not more accurate?
Well, there are acceptable deviances, but the NTSB found in their testing that this was performing outside of even the acceptable margin of error. The problem here is that even with a margin of error, your clearance was 75 feet. That's just not enough to safely operate in airspace.
Chris, is the emerging picture that there is a single point of failure, or that this might be a bunch of stuff piled together?
This is shaping up to be a series of events, some of them long-standing policies that came together to allow this disaster to happen.
Chris Van Cleve in Washington for us. Thank you very much, Chris.
Inside of that Black Hawk helicopter have yet to be recovered. We know that recovery efforts will resume soon as sun comes up this morning. Now, we also are expecting the flight manifest with the names of the victims, all of them who were on board the commercial aircraft, to potentially be released today. And we also know that President Donald Trump has plans to meet with some of the victims' families. It is unclear when that meeting will happen. Now, as for the investigation, that is ramping up this morning. You mentioned the black boxes have been recovered from both aircraft, both the airplane as well as the Black Hawk helicopter. The NTSB telling us yesterday that they expect to have a preliminary report with a readout from these black boxes within the next 30 days. Investigators are also waiting for a crane to arrive on this crash site. That crane will be helpful in trying to remove much of this debris. That will be critical in this investigation, as well as the debris will hold clues for investigators. And Kate, this morning we're also learning about staffing in that air traffic control tower. We heard that air traffic control audio in which they warned the pilot of the Black Hawk helicopter about the commercial regional jet. And now CNN has learned that one air traffic controller was actually working two different tower positions, directing traffic for both local traffic as well as helicopter traffic. However, this source tells us that that is not out of the norm. Kate?
And Ray, there's also new reporting today about some other recent close calls at DCA. What are you picking up on that?
Right. So what we have learned is just about a day before Wednesday night's deadly incident that there was another flight approaching Reagan National Airport, and it was forced to abort its first landing after a helicopter came close to its path. So concerning information that there was another situation where a helicopter yet again coming close into its path. And I've spoken to several people within the aviation industry yesterday, and they brought up this idea that it is time to ask the question as to whether these military aircraft should be flying in the same airspace along the same path as these commercial aircraft. Of course, as the NTSB wraps up its investigation, which will be many, many months from now, they will make recommendations that will essentially change aviation safety for years to come, to essentially make sure that this sort of thing does not happen again. But certainly people paying a lot of attention as to whether these military aircraft should be flying in the same airspace as these commercial aircraft around this airport. Kate?
Renee, thank you very much. John?
And as Kate was mentioning, there is also new information this morning on the Army Black Hawk helicopter in the crash. Sources tell the New York Times it appears to have been too high and out of its approved flight path. There's some new information on the pilots of the helicopter as well. Let's get right to CNN's Natasha Bertrand at the Pentagon. Natasha, what's the latest from there this morning?
Well, John, we're still trying to sort through all of the information that we're getting about this Black Hawk, and the Department of Defense, of course, is doing the same. It's interesting that the New York Times reported that this was a helicopter that was flying at above 300 feet because the helicopters that are training as part of these missions with these Black Hawks, they're supposed to be under 200 feet. And in fact, CNN has reported that the last reading that this helicopter gave and provided to these flight radars and flight trackers was that it was at 200 feet at the time of the collision. So either that was incorrect or something else went wrong here, but that is going to be part of the investigation as well. Now, we know still that the helicopter was on what has been described to us as a pretty routine training mission. This is something that the pilots would have been experienced with because, as we reported, the pilot and the co-pilot, they've had between them about 1,500 hours of flight hours, and so they were not junior pilots. This is not something that they would have been unfamiliar with. However, Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of Defense, he did acknowledge yesterday that a quote mistake was made and that there may have been an elevation issue. Now, the time.
And then on February 2nd, 2025, when a Philadelphia Medical Rescue Air jet went down in a nosedive crash into the Northeast Philadelphia neighborhood of Coppin Avenue, killing at least one person with 22 others injured, including 11 homes being damaged from the crash. Departing from Opelika, Florida, while coming out of the Northeast Philadelphia airport with Mexican passengers on their way to Mexico from the Scherners Hospital for Kids in Philadelphia. Let's show the news footages.
Now at 11, new details about that deadly medical jet crash in Northeast Philadelphia. Investigators are combing through the burned cars and damaged homes for clues while neighbors try to fully process exactly what happened last night. The latest on the investigation into what caused that aircraft to go down just moments after takeoff. It is Saturday night. I'm Walter Perez. The big story in Action News is the latest in a deadly medical jet crash in Northeast Philadelphia. It happened just after 6 p.m., not too far from the Roosevelt Mall. Tonight, officials from Mexico have identified the mother and the child among the 6 victims of that aircraft as Lisbeth Murillo Osuna and Valentina Guzman Murillo. One person on the ground was also killed, as 19 others on the ground were injured. Officials from the National Transportation Safety Board say the flight first departed from Opelika, Florida yesterday around noon. It arrived in Northeast Philadelphia Airport a couple of hours later before departing a bit past 6 p.m. It climbed to about 1,500 feet before plummeting back to the ground. The flight was headed for Missouri before continuing to Tijuana. We have team coverage on the latest developments. Action News reporter Brianna Gallagher has an update on the injured victims. Katie Catro spoke with witnesses, and Brianna Smith has the latest from officials investigating this crash. We begin with Brianna.
Walter, the NTSB classified the crash as an accident, and you can see flashing lights behind me. First responders and experts from the local to the federal level have been on the ground for more than 24 hours now, searching for more potential victims, assessing the damage and collecting evidence. The NTSB says this could take days, even weeks, for this process. And right now they're on the search for the jet's black box.
The entire flight lasted less than a minute.
We have a lost aircraft. We're not exactly sure what happened.
This video shows the massive explosion in a busy thoroughfare after a medical jet crashed near Roosevelt Mall in Northeast Philadelphia just after 6 p.m. on Friday.
We were looking at GPS data on the aircraft, a slight right turn followed by a slight left turn, and then a steep descent towards the ground where it crashed.
The NTSB says Learjet 55, operated by Jet Rescue Air Ambulance, was flying to Missouri from the Northeast Philadelphia airport. The 6 members on board, including a child and her mother, died. They've been identified as Lisbeth Murillo Osuna and Valentina Guzman Murillo. Shriners Children's Philadelphia says the child received treatment and was headed home to Mexico.
We mourn their loss, and they are in our thoughts and in our prayers.
Mayor Sherelle Parker says at least one person in a vehicle was killed and 19 others injured, but that number could increase as the investigation continues.
The city is working around the clock to keep people safe, to understand what happened, and to be there for those who are impacted.
As the sun rose on Saturday, this is what the road looked like from Chopper 6. A huge crater, charred cars, and 5 scorched homes with debris spanning nearly 6 blocks. The NTSB says now they're desperately searching for the cockpit voice recorder.
Hopefully, once we can find it, that's the biggest question right now. We can take that back to our lab and evaluate it. I encourage everyone to stay out of the accident site. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, and that black box is an important part of the investigation. So if you see debris, do not touch it. Instead, call the NTSB or 911. Also contact 911 if you know someone who is missing. Now, as for the investigation, we expect to learn more details from city officials late tomorrow morning. Live in Northeast Philadelphia, Brianna Smith, Channel 6 Action News. Walter?
Okay, Brianna, thank you. The Mexican consulate and Jet Rescue Air Ambulance are working closely with local and federal authorities as they work to identify all the victims from the plane crash.
A few families have been trying to identify if their loved ones were in the plane.
Federal investigators combing through charred debris after a medical transport plane nosedived and exploded near a mall and neighborhoods in Northeast Philadelphia. The crash sending people scrambling for cover. Taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport Friday, the Learjet was in the air for less than a minute before it crashed, killing one person on the ground and all 6 Mexican citizens on board, including Liseth Murillo Osuna and her daughter Valentina Guzman Murillo, who was 11 years old, according to Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. They were heading home to Mexico after 4 months of treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital. The fiery explosion also injured 22 others, according to officials. Andre Howard says his 10-year-old son was struck in the head with metal while trying to protect his younger sister.
We're supposed to be home relaxing, and we're here fighting for his life.
Beyond the yellow tape along Cottman Avenue, as many as 11 homes significantly damaged in the crash. Now, in this shaking community, the long road to recovery underway.
So as far as the Black Hawk helicopter could it have been a kamikaze flight mission? There are acceptable deviances from flying altitudes, but this was performing at least 130 feet above its ordnance. And way outside of the acceptable margin of error, with the pilot in last minute decided to lower his helicopter after air traffic controller warnings and around in the Reagan National Airport. If you saw my first Unusual Event Series episode, The January Fire, you'll start seeing the similar tactics and events. Both events lesser than 5 days apart, both happening in the beginning of the year, and both involving mass casualties, giving fear tactics and sacrificial depopulation schemes, or worse, the targeting of an adoption interbreeded white parent with kid who's Asian family. Could the U.S. government have been not trying to piss the Asians off? Probably we'll never know. But that brings us to the end of today's episode. Make sure you like and subscribe onto the channel, and until the next video, God bless.